The hippocampus is what I like to call the packing and shipping center, and it's an area of the brain we're rapidly learning more about. Recent studies show that the hippocampus plays a role in putting an emotional experience into perspective by working with the amygdala as coordinator and keeping it as calm as possible during an emotionally arousing experience. By aiding the coordinator to stay calmer while it's trying to translate the experience, the hippocampus indirectly has influence over whether emotional response to the body is turned on full blast or not. But the hippocampus also plays a primary role in the formation, organization, and storage of memory by serving as a sort of temporary packing and shipping center of information. The hippocampus shapes explicit or fact-based memory, processes spatial information, and encodes the sequence of an event before it's shipped into long-term memory. So let's take a moment here and talk about the difference between explicit and implicit memory formation. Explicit memory is what contributes to the timeline of our life. It's a type of memory we know is from our past. The hippocampus acts as a sort of time stamper, making a memory identifiable as something from the past and not of the current moment. If it's blocked, memory fragments remain unassembled without a date or a timeline tag, and we're left unable to differentiate if what we're experiencing is something from the past or something from the present moment. So in summary, an explicit memory gets a sort of a time date stamp on it from the hippocampus, so that when we recall it, we know it's from the past. Now, implicit memory can be the physical memory or the emotional memory that goes along with the experience. Take tying your shoes as example. You bend over and just do it now, right? It feels pretty automatic, as if it's simply a part of the present moment. That's an implicit memory. But if you stopped and thought about it, you might be able to recall a sister or a family member teaching you how to tie your shoes, or you can visualize struggling with it a little bit as a kid. That's an explicit memory, and you know it's describing something from an earlier time in your life. When explicit memory and implicit memory are packaged and time-stamped by the hippocampus, the memory becomes stored as a whole, or what is referred to as an integrated memory. And those are the memories that we can clearly recognize, both in our body and mind, as being from the past and not related to the current moment. If hippocampus function gets blocked, memories don't get fully packaged or assembled and remain disintegrated or fragmented. In other words, the emotional response that went with the experience doesn't get packaged with the more time-based details of the experience, leaving them sort of floating in a disconnected way. Then our brains, doing what they're designed to do, continually try to make sense of these fragmented, non-integrated memories, sometimes inaccurately associating them to current experiences that seem similar. Have you ever had a wacky dream with all sorts of weird bits and pieces weaved into a story? That's a sort of an example of what your brain does. It tries to make sense of pieces of memory by putting them into a storyline of sorts. Well, the same thing happens with implicit, non-integrated memory fragments. Your brain doesn't like unfinished stories or loose ends, so it matches it to what it can, which can often be a mistake, like when it matches an old emotional memory to a current situation. Your brain is trying to close the loop and resolve this open end, but it will match any experience that looks even close. So flashbacks of any kind, visual or emotional, are basically your brain trying to close the loop of an emotional or physical experience that was upsetting enough that it never got time-stamped or integrated by the hippocampus. Cortisol, which occurs with prolonged levels of stress, blocks hippocampus function and is a major barrier to the formation of explicit time-stamped memory, which is one reason some people say they can't remember much of their childhood. Alcohol, rage, and the use of sleeping pills are also well-known blockers of hippocampal activity. A blackout of memory, regardless of source, is describing hippocampus shutdown. So part of the recovery and integration of our brain is referring to the increase in our ability to connect implicit emotional or body memory to explicit time-stamped experience memory. This helps organize our brains, helps it become less fragmented, and helps us complete our personal storyline, all of which helps us experience relevant emotion that does match our current life. The packing and shipping center also consolidates or strengthens memories as we sleep. So taking those naps when we feel overloaded actually helps us retain new information. Recent studies also describe the hippocampus activity during flexible thinking, imagination, and social behavior. But as we just mentioned, prolonged stress decreases hippocampus activity and suppresses the growth of new neurons. So you can start to see how an out of sync stress response system has the potential to slowly degrade imagination, memory, our ability to learn, and our social skills. And if this brain area is weak, it can leave the coordinator kind of high and dry on its own to interpret and determine emotional response with little consideration of perspective. So how can we influence this area? Well, I haven't found concrete scientific support yet that says we can actually influence this area directly. But my experience has been that many pathways in our nervous system have two-way components. They work from the inside out, helping to shape our behaviors, but we can also influence them from the outside in with intentional behavioral effort or good habits. So for the hippocampus, I interpret these studies in this way. If the hippocampus shrinks or its function declines with stress, excessive alcohol, and use of rage, then it stands to reason that by managing stress and alcohol use more effectively and centering our emotional response system, that its function could stand to improve. And if the hippocampus is active during social behavior and flexible thinking, then I can see how working this pathway in reverse by intentionally practicing social behaviors and flexible thinking could positively impact its growth. But that's my perspective. Let's keep going.